The fluorescent lights in the hallway buzzed the way they always did at 5 in the morning. That low, steady hum that had become the soundtrack to my life for the past 6 years. I sat in my wheelchair with my plaid blanket draped over my knees, the one my wife had knitted before she passed, and I could feel the adhesive from the blood draw tape still tugging at the skin on the back of my hand. That my daughter-in-law Jenny stood behind me. Both her hands were on the push handles of the chair, and her fingernails were digging into the plastic grips, so hard I could hear them squeak. "Dad," she said, her voice too bright for this hour. "It's getting light out. I want to take you somewhere solar." I didn't answer. I hadn't answered her much in the 3 years since my son died. She spoke to me like she was reading a script someone else had written, and I had stopped trying to fill in the blanks a long time ago. She pushed me out of my room and down the corridor. The wheels made that soft rhythmic sound against the linoleum, click thump, like a heartbeat that didn't quite know when to stop. We passed the nurse's station. M.A. Radha was on duty, the night nurse with the kind eyes and the silver streak in her hair. She looked up from her logbook and gave us a small wave. Jenny smiled back at her, that tight, practiced smile she wore like a second face. "RLY morning checkup," Jenny said. "Doctor wants some blood work before breakfast." M.A. Radha nodded and went back to her notes. She didn't ask why the checkup required a trip through the side door. She didn't ask why Jenny's hands were shaking. She didn't ask why my blanket was pulled up to my chin on a warm August morning. Nobody ever asked enough questions. The side door swung open and the air hit me. So and damp. Ryeing the smell of dew on asphalt and the faint sourness from the dumpster behind the kitchen. The parking lot was empty except for Jenny's blue Ford sedan, parked under the single working light pole. The sky was still dark, but there was a thin gray line creeping up from the eastern edge of the horizon, the kind of pale light that made everything look washed out and tired. Jenny pushed me across the lot. My feet scraped against the footrests, and I felt every crack in the pavement through the thin rubber soles of my slippers. She stopped at the REAR door of the Ford and let go of the handles. The chair rocked four-way an inch and stopped as she walked around to face me. She crouched down, her knees cracking in the quiet morning air, and brought her face close to mine. She had put on too much perfume. It was sweet and cloying, the kind of scent that clung to the back of your throat and didn't let go. I could see the fine wrinkles around her eyes, the roots of her hair showing gray beneath the dye. She wasn't a cruel woman. Not always. Not before I remembered the apple pies she used to bake on Sundays. The way she'd bring one to my room still warm, with a little pat of butter melting in the center. She remembered my eye drops. She remembered my favorite brand of ginger ale. That was before the accident, before my son went off the mountain road in the rain, before the funeral and the insurance and the house she sold so quickly it made my head spin. "Dad," she said again, softer this time. "I need you to help me." I looked at her. Her pupils were wide in the dim light. Her lips were dry, cracked at the corners. She had been chewing on them, I could tell. She always chewed her lips when she was nervous, right down to where the skin split and bled a little. "Jenny," I said, my voice low and scratchy from sleep. "Where are you taking me?" She turned her head to the side, looking at the arcade shape of the nursing home behind us. Then she turned back to me, and her face changed. It went from soft to tight in less than a second, like she had flipped a switch inside herself. She stood up. She took a step back her flat scuffing against the damp asphalt. And then she fell. It happened fast, but I saw every piece of it. She went down like a tree coming out of the ground, all in one piece, straight backway road. The back of her head hit the pavement with a sound that was more solid than I expected, a wet, dull crack that made my stomach turn. Her arms flew out. Her legs splayed. Her eyes closed and her mouth stayed open, frozen in a shape that was almost a smile. That she lay there on the cold ground. Her hair fanned out around her head like a halo made of straw. I sat in my chair and watched her. 17 seconds passed. I counted them. Then the side door banged open and M.A. Radha came running out. She had her phone in her hand, still lit up with whatever RT she had been reviewing. She saw Jenny on the ground and she made a sound, a high, thin keening noise that I had never heard come out of her before. As she dropped to her knees beside Jenny and root patting her cheeks. Jenny, can you hear me?" Jenny didn't move. M.A. Radha looked up at me, her eyes huge and white in the half-dark. "Mr. Edwin," she said, her voice shaking. "What happened?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, Jenny's eyelids fluttered. Her fingers twitched. She made a small, soft moan and opened her eyes. They rolled around in their sockets for a few seconds, unfocused and glassy. And then she saw M.A. Radha's face, and she jerked back way road. She scrambled away from M.A. Radha, her heels sliding on the wet pavement, and she ended up with her back pressed against the front wheel of my chair. Her hands came up in front of her face like she was while riding off a bloat. "Don't," she screamed. "Don't come near me." M.A. Radha froze. She looked at Jenny, then at me. I hadn't moved. My hands were still on my blanket, my feet still on the footrests, the brakes on my chair still locked in place. "He pushed me," Jenny said, pointing at me. Her finger was shaking. He got so angry. He grabbed my wrists and he pushed me. I came here to be nice to him, to visit him, and he attacked me." She held out her wrists. There were red marks on them, two parallel lines of angry pink against her pale skin. I saw them clearly. I also saw where her thumb and forefinger had been squeezing just before she fell. She had done it to herself. She had done it with her hands behind her back, out of my sight, while she was crouched in front of my chair. I didn't say anything that Emerda stood up. She was a good nurse, one of the best I had ever had, but she was also a woman who had worked in elderly for 18 years. She had seen things. She had seen old men and old women lash out, for real, in ways that left bruises. She looked at my hands, still resting placidly on my blanket. She looked at my locked brakes. She looked at Jenny's wrists that I could see the doubts swimming in her eyes. She didn't want to believe Jenny, but she didn't want to disbelieve her either. The world had taught her that the old, the frail, the silent ones were sometimes the ones who snapped. She helped Jenny to her feet. Jenny swayed and gripped M.A. Radha's arm. Her eyes were wet, but not with real tears. I had seen my wife cry. I had seen my son cry. I knew the difference between grief and performance. "Let's get you inside," M.A. Radha said. "Let's get you to the office." They walked toward the door, Jenny leaning heavily on M.A. Radha. Just before they went through, Jenny turned her head and looked back at me. Her face was still that mask of pain and fear, but her eyes were different. They were cold, flat, and triumphant. She had won the first round. She knew it. I knew it that they came back 10 minutes later. M.A. Radha was not with them. The night supervisor came out instead, a woman in her 40s named K.A. Run with a tight bun and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She was accompanied by one of the daytime orderlies and a security guard who looked like he had been woken up from a nap in the break room. K.A. Rin walked over to me. She crouched down, just like Jenny had, but her face was all business. "Mr. Edwin," she said, "can you tell me what happened?" I looked at her. The sky was getting lighter now, that gray line spreading into a band of pale orange that touched the windows of the nursing home. I could hear birds rooting up in the old oak tree by the entrance. "She pushed me out here," I said, "and told me she was taking me somewhere solar. Then she fell down and said I pushed her." Karen looked at me for a long moment. She was a professional. She had to be fair, but I could see the math happening behind her eyes. One elderly man in a wheelchair. One younger woman with visible marks on her wrists. One witness who had arrived after the fact. "Let's get you back to your room," she said. "We'll sort this out." Jenny's voice came from the doorway. "He needs to be moved," she said. "He's not safe in general population. Today he pushed me. Tomorrow it could be someone else. He needs to be transferred to the secure wing. Or better yet, St. Mary's. They have the beds there. They have the right kind of supervision." St. Mary's, the name landed in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. St. Mary's was the last state-run facility in the county that still took residents with so-called behavioral issues. It was underfunded. It was understaffed. It had a reputation that followed it like a bad smell, and everyone in the senior CA community knew it. Jenny had mentioned St. Mary's to me once before, about 3 years ago. My son was still alive then. We had been sitting in the nursing home's day room, watching some game show on the television, and Jenny had leaned over and said, out of the blue, "You know, Dad, St. Mary's has lower fees. And the state picks up most of the tab. It's quieter over there. Peaceful." My son had given her a look. A hard look, the kind that said not another word. She had shut her mouth and not brought it up again. That was 3 years ago. My son had been gone for 3 years, and Ginny had been coming less and less. She had stopped coming at all, actually, until last week, when she showed up at my door with a smile and a box of store-bought keys and a stack of papers she wanted me to sign. I hadn't signed them. Now the guard was behind me, his hands on my chair. He rolled me back through the side door, past Notarized station, down the hall. I saw Notarized look up at me with worried eyes. She wanted to say something, but she didn't. They put me back in my room. The guard closed the door, and I heard the latch click. Not locked, just closed. I sat in my chair, in the growing light of the morning, and I pulled my phone out from under my blanket. It was an old one, a flip phone with a cracked screen, the kind that could only make calls and receive texts. I had kept it for years because my son had given it to me. He had programmed his number into it, and then Ginny's number, and then the nursing home's front desk. I had added one other number, one I hadn't used in a very long time. There was a text waiting for me. I hadn't heard it come in because I had the ringer turned off. I flipped the phone open and read the message on the tiny screen, 7 a.m. chapel. Pastor Heinrich pulled the camera footage. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the phone and tucked it back into the blanket. The chapel was at the east end of the corridor, all the way down past the physical therapy room and the activity center. I knew the way. I had walked it with my walker before my legs got too weak, and I had rolled it with my chair after. I waited until the hallway went quiet, until I heard DK Ren's door close and Jenny's voice fade out. Then I unlocked my own brakes and STA route, pushing the wheels turned slowly. The corridor seemed longer in the EARLY light, the shadows stretching out like fingers reaching for me. I passed the nurse's station. Notarized was on the phone, her voice low and hurried. She saw me roll by and her eyes went wide, but she didn't stop me. The chapel door was open. I rolled inside. Pastor Heinrich stood at the window, his back to me. He was a tall man in his 60s with a bald head and gold-rimmed glasses, and he had been living in this nursing home just as long as I had. He said it was his HRT that put him here. I never asked for details. He never asked about my legs. But I knew that before he took his vows, before the HRT trouble, before any of it, he had spent 20 years as a private investigator. He had told me that once, over a chess game we played in the day room. He had told me in a way that made me think he hadn't told many other people. He turned around when he heard my wheels. He held up his phone, screen facing me. The video was grainy, black and white, shot from a camera mounted above the side door. I could see the parking lot. I could see my own chair, still and unmoving. I could see Ginny crouch in front of me. I could see her stand up and step back, her hands going behind her. I could see the exact moment she pinched her own wrist, hard enough to leave those red marks. Then she felt that the video had no sound, but it didn't need any. Pastor Heinrich lowered the phone. He took a sip of coffee from the mug he was holding, and he looked at me over the rim. She filed the transfer request with K.A. Rin this morning, he said. She told K.A. Rin you were a danger to yourself and others. She said Senile Rees had already been contacted, and they have a bed ready. I nodded. I didn't say anything. Pastor Heinrich reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. I opened it. It was a bank transfer receipt, printed from some online portal, showing a transaction from Ginny's account to a name I didn't recognize. Thomas Ray. Amount, $3,500 RS. Date, last Tuesday. Memo line, will supplement attachment. Pastor Heinrich said, I have a friend at the county prosecutor's office. He did some digging. Thomas Ray is a document forger. Lost his notary license 10 years ago. Served 3 years for falsifying a will. He runs a print shop on the east side now. The sign out front says Notary Services. I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket next to my chest. The paper was RM there, like it was alive. Pastor Heinrich looked at me. There was a question in his eyes, but he didn't ask it. He had known me for 6 years. We had played chess. We had watched football. We had sat in silence through long afternoons with nothing but the sound of the radiators hissing. He knew some things about me. Not everything, but enough. I turned my chair around and rolled back toward the door. I paused at the threshold and looked over my shoulder at him. Thank you, Heinrich. He raised his coffee mug in a small salute. I rolled back down the hall. The sun was coming up in EA Renest now, yellow and bright, streaming through the windows at the end of the corridor. I could see dust motes floating in the light, dancing like they had nowhere to be, and all the time in the world that I passed the nurse's station again. Emma was still on the phone, but she was crying now. I didn't know who she was talking to. I didn't stop to ask that. I went back to my room. I closed the door. I sat by the window and watched the old oak tree sway in the morning breeze, and I waited for 7 o'clock to come. 7 o'clock came and went. I sat in my chair by the window and watched the sunlight climb up the trunk of the old oak tree. The leaves were thick and green, rustling against each other in the breeze, and a squirrel ran along a branch with something in its mouth. I didn't know what it was. I didn't much see a heard the door open behind me. I didn't turn around, Mr. Edwin. Karen's voice. She was the night supervisor, the one with the reading glasses on the chain and the tight bun. She had a voice that right authority without volume, the kind of voice that made people straighten up without meaning to. I had heard her calm down arguing families and soothe frightened residents. She was good at her job. I turned my chair slowly. She was standing in the doorway, her POA pressed against her chest like a shield. Behind her, in the hallway, I could see Jenny. She was standing with her arms crossed, her face still wearing that mask of hurt and apprehension that I had seen better acting at my grandson's school plays. Mr. Edwin, Karen said again. We need to talk about the situation this morning. I've reviewed the incident with the staff, and I've spoken with Jenny at length. She has expressed serious concerns about your well-being and the safety of other residents. I waited till Karen glanced back at Jenny. Jenny nodded. That small, quick movement that said go ahead, say it. I'm right here. Karen Clea read her throat. The protocol in situations like this is to conduct a full review of the resident's medical and behavioral history. That review takes time. But given the nature of the complaint and the visible marks on Jenny's wrists, we have to take precaution measures. She paused, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. Temporary relocation to the observation wing, she said. 24 to 48 hours, maximum. During that time, we'll have a psychological evaluation done, and we'll revisit the replan accordingly. Observation wing. That was the nicer name they gave the locked unit. The place where residents went when they were confused, or aggressive, or just too much trouble for the regular staff. I had been inside it once, years ago, to visit a man named Frank who had been my neighbor in the hall. Frank had Alzheimer's. He used to call me by his brother's name and cry about a dog he'd lost when he was 8. The observation wing had its own doors, its own schedule, its own set of rules about when you could see the sun. I don't think that's necessary, I said. Karen's eyebrows went up a fraction of an inch. She was not used to being challenged by the residents. Most of them nodded along, too tired or too confused to argue. But I had known her for 6 years. I had never given her trouble. I had never raised my voice. I had never done anything that required a second glance. That was on purpose. I understand you might feel that way, Karen said, her voice fully neutral. But the decision has been made as a temporary measure. We'll have someone come to move you in about an hour. In the meantime, I'd like to ask you to remain calm and imperative. She waited for me to push back. I didn't. I just looked past her, at Jenny, who was standing in the hallway with her arms still crossed and her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. I smiled at her. Just a small smile. The kind of smile that said I know something you don't. I saw her swallow. I saw her hands grip her own elbows a little rider. I knew what she was thinking. She was thinking about Senile. She was thinking about the papers she had tried to make me sign. She was thinking about the $3,500 RS she had sent to Thomas Ray, the man who could make a document look 60 years old with the right ink and the right paper. She didn't know I had the receipt. She didn't know what Pastor Heinrich had on his phone. She didn't know about the friend at the county prosecutor's office, the one with the quiet voice and the cold eyes. I had read a long time ago that the best weapon was not the one you showed. It was the one you kept hidden until the moment it mattered most. Karen left. She closed the door behind her, and this time I heard the lock click. I was not in the observation wing yet, but I was being contained. They were trying to make it easy for the orderlies to come and get me. I didn't wait for them. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. I flipped it open and scrolled through the contacts. There were only 5 numbers in there. Jenny, the nursing home front desk. Pastor Heinrich, my doctor's office. and one other. I pressed call. It rang twice. 3 times. 4 times. I counted them the way I had counted the seconds in the parking lot, steady and calm, one by one. On the 5th ring, a voice picked up on the other end. A man's voice, raspy and rough, like he had been smoking cigarettes since the day he was born. Edwin, Harry. I said that I heard him exhale, the long breath of a man who had been waiting a long time. 3 hours, he said. 3 hours since you called this number, and you finally use it at 7 in the morning. This better be good. It's good enough, I said. I need you to send me a file. The one we talked about before I came in here. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you sure that file stays dead if we don't touch it? Once it comes out, there's no putting it back. I'm sure. All right, he said. I'll have it delivered to the chapel by noon. The preacher has a cousin who works courier. He'll get it to him. Thank you, Harry. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you've got those papers in your hand, and that woman's face turns the color of spoiled milk. He laughed, a short bark of a sound, and then the line went dead. I put the phone away. An hour came and went. 2 orderlies arrived at my door. One was a young man with a shaved head and a silver ring in his EAR. The other was a woman built like a refrigerator, a RMS thick and red from the elbow down. They were gentle with me. I had to give them that. They didn't grab. They didn't rush. They took my chair by the handles and rolled me out of my room and down the hall. We passed the chapel. The door was closed. The lights were off inside. I didn't see Pastor Heinrich, but I saw a shadow moving past the window. I knew he was in there, waiting, and I knew the courier would come and the papers would find their way to me. They rolled me past the nurse's station. That was not there. A different nurse was on duty, a young woman I didn't recognize. She looked up from her computer and watched me go by with the kind of pity that made me want to laugh. They rolled me into the observation wing. The door was a heavy thing, gray metal with a small SQE window at eye level. The orderlies opened it with a key card, and the lock clicked open with a sound that was final and flat. They pushed me inside, and I saw the room. It was smaller than my regular room. The window was high on the wall, too high to see out of unless you stood up, which I couldn't. The bed was a hospital bed with rails on both sides. The floor was linoleum, scuffed and yellowed. There was a single chair in the corner, bolted to the floor. It was not a room meant for living. It was a room meant for waiting. The orderlies left me there. The door closed. The lock clicked again. I sat in the silence and counted the tiles on the ceiling. There were 47 of them. I counted them twice, just to be sure. I heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside my door. I could see a shape through the little window, distorted and blurry, but I knew who it was even without the face that Jenny does. She didn't come in. She stood there for a long time, and then she pressed a piece of paper against the glass. A notice of intent to transfer. St. Aimé Rees Elder CA Re Facility. Effective date, 2 days from now. The signature line was blank, waiting for my RK. She tapped the glass with her finger. Once, twice, 3 times. Then she walked away. I sat there for another hour. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just watched the light from the high window crawl across the floor, inch by inch, measuring out the time. Then I heard voices. 2 of them, low and urgent, speaking in the hall. I recognized one of them. It was the young orderly with the shaved head. The other was a woman, but not a nurse. Someone older, with a sharper edge to her voice. I heard the door unlock. It swung open. A woman stood in the doorway. She was in her 60s, with short gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a RK blazer and a pair of slacks that had been pressed so sharp they looked like they could cut glass. In her hand, she held a leather portfolio, and behind her stood the orderly with his mouth hanging open. "Mr. Edwin," she said. "My name is Helen Sutter. I'm from the county prosecutor's office. I need to ask you a few questions." I smiled. It was a long conversation. She asked me about Jenny. She asked me about the house my son had left behind. She asked me about the will, the one he had written before he died, the one that left everything to me and not to his wife. I told her what I knew. I told her about the documents Jenny had tried to make me sign last week. I told her about the bank transfer to Thomas Ray. I told her about the RKS on Jenny's wrists and the video Pastor Heinrich had saved on his phone that Helen Sutter took notes. She asked follow-up questions. She scratched out a few things and wrote them again, neat and precise in her leather folder. When she was done, she stood up. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a folded document. She handed it to me. It was the file Harry had promised, the one he had sent to the chapel. It was thick, maybe 30 pages. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what was in there. Mr. Edwin, Helen Sutter said. I'm going to speak with the nursing home administration now. I'm going to request that your transfer to the observation wing be reversed. I'm also going to request that Ginny Hendricks be asked to remain on the premises while I conduct a thorough review of the evidence you've provided. I nodded. She left. The door stayed open. I sat there in the quiet, holding the file in my hands, and I thought about all the years I had spent being quiet and small and invisible. I thought about the day my son died, and the way Ginny had cried at the funeral, and the way she had Estia Root selling his things a week later. I thought about the house he had built with his own hands, the one she sold to a developer who tore it down to make room for condominiums. That I thought about the will he had written, the one that had gone missing. I opened the file and looked at the first page. It was a copy of that will, the original, the one my son had signed with a notary present. The notary was not Thomas Ray. It was a different man, a man named Henry Fields, who had retired to Florida 10 years ago and would confirm the signature if anyone asked. The will said everything went to me. Every last dollar, every piece of property, every showry of stock, and every bond, and every insurance policy. Ginny had been left a small allowance, enough to live on for a year or while she found her feet. She had wanted more. She had wanted all of it, and she had found a man who could make old paper look newer and newer paper look older, and who could turn a missing document into a forged one with just the right amount of age. And the door swung open again. This time, it was Pastor Heinrich. He was wearing his collar and holding a folded envelope in his hand. He saw the file in my lap, and he nodded. Once, like a man who had just confirmed something he already knew. She came by the chapel, he said. About 10 minutes ago. She said she wanted to pray. She asked me if I had seen anything unusual. A courier, maybe. A package. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. I said I hadn't seen anything. He paused. I didn't mention the file. I didn't mention the video. I smiled again. It was easier to smile now, easier than it had been in years. Thank you, Heinrich. Don't thank me, he said. Thank your son. He's the one who had the foresight to keep copies of everything. He's the one who left instructions with the attorney. He's the one who asked me, while he was still alive, to keep an eye on you and to make sure nothing ever happened to you that shouldn't. I looked at him. I had known Pastor Heinrich for 6 years, and I had never heard him say that before. He came to me a month before the accident, Heinrich said. He said he had a feeling. He said he didn't trust the changes he was seeing in his wife. He asked me to watch out for you, just in case. He put the envelope on the table beside my bed. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. It was not typed. It was handwritten, in a script I knew better than my own. My son's hand. It said, Dad, if you're reading this, I was right. I'm sorry I didn't stay. Take ca of what's yours. I love you. I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket, next to the bank receipt. Outside, in the hallway, I heard shouting. It was Jenny. Her voice was high and thin, cutting through the walls like a knife. Where is she? Where is that woman from the prosecutor's office? I demand to know what's going on. I heard Helen Sutter's voice, calm and measured, saying something I couldn't quite catch. Then I heard Jenny start to cry. It was not the performance from the parking lot. This was real, ugly, full of rage and fear, and the sound of something falling. Apart. I had heard that sound before, on the other end of phone calls when people got news they didn't expect. The sound of a life coming undone. I sat back in my chair and looked up at the high window. The sunlight was bright and steady, pouring in through the glass and landing in a warm on the yellowed floor. I had been waiting 6 years for this morning. Now it was finally here. The shouting in the hallway went on for a while. I sat in my chair and listened to it rise and fall like a tide. Jenny's voice was the loudest, sharp and cracking at the edges, but there were other voices too. Helen Sutter's calm replies. The orderlies trying to get Jenny to lower her voice. Ka Wren's clipped, professional interjections. I heard footsteps storming down the hall. The door to my room swung open, and Jenny stood there. Her face was red. The mask she had put on that morning was SMEA red under her eyes, making her look like she had been in a fight. Her hair had come loose from its clip and hung in strings around her cheeks. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving under that tight save digand. You, she said, pointing at me. You did this. I looked at her. Did what? Jenny, don't you play innocent with me. She stepped into the room. The door swung shut behind her, but it didn't lock. I could see through the small window that Helen Sutter was standing in the hallway, watching, waiting. She had let Jenny come in. She wanted to see what would happen. Jenny walked closer to me. She stopped a few feet away and put her hands on her hips. Her fingers were trembling. I could see the red marks on her wrists, still visible, still raw. I spent 3 years taking care of that house, she said. 3 years paying the property tax. 3 years fixing the roof and patching the driveway and making sure the pipes didn't freeze in the winter. Your son left it to you, but you weren't there. You were in here, sitting in your chair, waiting for someone to bring you your dinner. I did the work. I put in the hours. I waited, and then I found out he didn't leave me anything. Not the house. Not the insurance. Not even his fishing boat. All of it went to you. She shook her head, a short, violent motion. You didn't even like fishing. You never went out on that boat once. I asked him, before he died, if he would leave me something. He said he would. He promised me. She was crying now. Real TRS, hot and fast, cutting tracks through the SMEA red mask ARA. Her voice cracked on the word promised. Jenny, I said. My son never broke a promise in his life. She read at me. He told me the night before the accident that he was going to change his will. He said he realized he had been unfair to you. He said he was going to draw up a new document and give you half of everything. He showed me the draft. He asked me to witness it. I watched her face change. The anger root to falter, replaced by something else. Something that looked a lot like dread. I never saw that draft, she said. There was no new will. There was only the old one. The one that left everything to you. It was in the safe deposit box at the bank, I said. He told me he put it there. He gave me the key. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should go get it. She shook her head again, but slower this time. There was no key. I went through all his things. I went through his desk, his files, his lockbox. There was no key to any safe deposit box. He gave it to Pastor Heinrich, I said. He said he didn't want you to find it by accident. He wanted me to get it, with the pastor's help, if the time ever came. Jenny's face went pale. She sat down on the edge of my bed. Her hands dropped from her hips and landed in her lap. Limp and useless. He was always so reeful, she said. He was always so goddamn reeful. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet and red, but there was something else in them now. Something I hadn't seen in a long time. It looked almost like shame. I didn't plan it, she said. Not at first. When he died, I thought the will would be split. I thought I would get at least something. But when I went to the lawyer, he read the document, and I found out I got nothing. A year's allowance. That was it. A year's worth of money to live on while I found my feet. She laughed. It was a hollow sound, bitter and broken. Find my feet. I was 42 years old. I had no job, no savings, no family to fall back on. My mother had died the year before. My father was in a facility upstate, and he didn't even remember my name anymore. I had nothing. I didn't say anything. I let her talk, so I went looking for that new will. The draft he said he made. I thought if I could find it, I could get the lawyer to honor it. But I couldn't find it. I searched everywhere. I tore that house apart. And then I realized he must have hidden it somewhere I couldn't reach. She looked at me. He was protecting you. He was always protecting you. From the day I met him, it was always you. He was my son. I said, he was my husband, she shouted. Her voice bounced off the walls of the little room. She caught herself and lowered her voice. He was my husband. We were supposed to build a life together. But he never let me in. Not all the way. He kept things from me. He kept money from me. He kept you from me. In a way, because you were the one he trusted. Not me. Never me. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. The mask SMEA read further, making RK streaks across her cheekbones. So when I heard about Thomas Ray, she went on, I thought, that's the answer. That's the way to fix it. I didn't want all of it. I just wanted my shari. The shari he promised me. I went to Ray and I asked him if he could make a supplement to the will. A codicil. Something that would give me half. He said he could do it for $3,500 RS. She looked at me, and for a moment, she was just a tired, Lonely woman sitting on a hospital bed. Not a villain, not a monster, just someone who had run out of options and made the worst choice. He forged it, I said. He didn't just make a codicil. He made the whole new will. He made it look like my son had signed it 2 weeks before the accident. And then you came here to get me to sign a transfer request, because you knew if I went to Senile, nobody would ever ask me about the will again. She nodded. Her head dipped down, heavy, like it was too much to hold up. I thought if you were at Senile, I could present the forged will to the court and nobody would challenge it. You would be too far away, too isolated, too confused. And even if you did say something, who would believe you? A man in a wheelchair in a state-run facility. They'd write it off as dementia. That was the plan. That was the plan, she echoed. The door opened. Helen Sutter stepped into the room. Behind her stood Pastor Heinrich, and behind him, 2 uniformed county deputies. One of them was holding a pair of handcuffs, the metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. Jenny looked at them. She didn't stand up. She didn't run. She just sat there on the edge of my bed, her hands loose in her lap, her face a mess of TRS and ruined makeup. I knew it was wrong, she said. I knew it from the moment I made that first call. But I told myself it was fair. I told myself he would have wanted me to have something. And by the time I realized I had gone too far, I was already in too deep. Helen Sutter stepped 4-way road. Jenny Hendricks, I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, attempted forgery, and filing false documents with a probate court. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. Jenny stood up. She didn't resist. She didn't argue. She just turned to me, one last time, and her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. He loved you more than he loved me, she said. That was the real problem. All the money, all the property, that was just the proof. He loved you more, and I could never compete with that. She walked out with the deputies. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. I watched her go, down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the chapel, out the front door. I watched until she was gone. Helen Sutter came back in. She sat down in the chair bolted to the floor and looked at me. The will is still valid, she said. The original one. The one your son signed with Notarized. We've confirmed the signature. Everything goes to you. I nodded. Also, she said, reaching into her portfolio, there's something else I need to tell you. We found records of an insurance policy your son took out 2 years before he died. It was held in trust for you. You're listed as the sole beneficiary. How much? She told me the number. It was not a small number. It was the kind of number that changed things. The kind of number that meant I could go wherever I wanted, live however I wanted, leave the nursing home, and never look back. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there in my chair, under the high window, and let the information settle. Pastor Heinrich came in. He put his hand on my shoulder. You did good, Edwin, he said. You did what you had to do. I didn't do anything, I said. I just waited. Waiting is doing something, he said. It's the rightest thing to do. Most people can't do it. The sun was overhead now, high and bright, pouring through the window in a column of golden light. The dust motes danced in it, lazy and patient. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my son's note. The handwriting was smudged in places, worn from being folded and unfolded so many times. I read it again, even though I knew it by heart. Dad, if you're reading this, I was right. I'm sorry I didn't stay. Take care of what's yours. I love you. I folded it back up and put it away. Rin came to the door. She looked different now. Her shoulders were lower, her face less stern. She had been the one to authorize my transfer to the observation wing. She had been the one who believed Jenny's story, at least enough to act on it. But she was also the one who had called the county prosecutor's office as soon as Pastor Heinrich showed her the video. Mr. Edwin, she said, I want to apologize. I made a decision based on incomplete information. I should have investigated more thoroughly before moving you. You did your job, I said. You followed protocol. Still, she said. I'm sorry. I nodded. When can I go back to my room? Right now, she said. Your room is ready. I've had the cleaning staff freshen it up. There's fresh sheets on the bed. New flowers on the windowsill. I smiled at her. It was a real smile, the first I had felt in my face in a long time. Thank you, Ka Ren. The orderly with the shaved head came and pushed my chair out of the observation wing. We passed through the heavy metal door and into the regular, our hallway. The lights were softer here. The walls were painted a Romero color. I could hear the television in the day room, some King show, the host making jokes about burnt toast. Emeritha was back at the nurse's station. She saw me rolling by, and she came around the desk. She knelt down beside my chair, her face full of worry and relief. "Mr. Edwin," she said, "I am so sorry. I should have known. I should have seen something. I've been taking care of you for 4 years. I know you're not violent. I should have said something." "You did say something," I said. "You called Pastor Heinrich. You told him something was wrong." She blinked. "How did you know?" "He told me," I said. "He told me this morning, after you called him with your suspicions. Without you, the video would have been erased by the time anyone thought to check." Emeritha stood up. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "I knew that woman was lying," she said. "I knew it from the way she looked at you when she pushed you past my desk. There was no love in her eyes. There was only something else. Something cold." I reached up and patted her hand. "You did good, Emeritha. You did good." She laughed, a small, watery sound. "Look at you, comforting me. I'm supposed to be the one comforting you. Take it where you can get it," I said. The orderly pushed me down the hall to my room. The door was open, and inside, I could see that Ka Rin had told the truth. The sheets were fresh. The windowsill had a small vase with yellow daisies in it. My books were stacked neatly on the bedside table. My blanket was folded over the foot of the bed. Everything was in its place. That the orderly helped me out of my chair and into my regular, room chair by the window. I liked this chair better. It had soft cushions and worn arm rests, and it faced the old oak tree. I could sit here for hours and watch the birds. That I sat there and looked out the window. The afternoon sun was on my face. The leaves of the oak tree rustled in the breeze, and a blue jay landed on one of the branches, tilted its head, and read at me. I read back. I had spent 6 years in this nursing home. I had come here because my legs had given out and my son had been too busy to see for me at home. I had come here because it was the practical choice, the easy choice, the one that made sense on paper. But I had never really belonged here. Not in my heart. I had been waiting for something to end, or something to begin, and I hadn't known which until now. I reached into my jacket one more time. I took out the bank receipt, the one for the forged will, and I tore it into small pieces. I took out my son's note, and I read it one more time. Then I folded it fully and tucked it into the front pocket of my jacket, close to my chest. I took out my phone. I flipped it open. I called Harry. He picked up on the first ring. "You get it done." "Done," I said. "Good. What now?" I looked out the window at the blue jay. It was still there, still watching me, like it was waiting for something. "Now I start planning the rest of my life," I said. Harry laughed. "Sounds like a good plan." "It is," I said. "It's the best plan I've had in years." I hung up. I put the phone away. I settled back into my room chair, and I let the afternoon sun wash over me, warm and golden and full of the promise of tomorrow. 2 weeks passed. The nursing home settled back into its usual rhythm, the quiet hum of routine that had been my life for 6 years. But everything felt different now. The hallways seemed wider. The light through the windows seemed brighter. Even the coffee from the machine in the day room tasted better, though I knew that had nothing to do with the coffee. Word spread quickly. In a place like this, news traveled faster than the flu. Within 2 days, every resident and staff member knew what had happened. Jenny's arrest made the local paper, a small item on page 3, but that was enough. The article mentioned my name. It mentioned the video. It mentioned the forged will and the money that had been set aside for me. I became something I had never been before in this place. I became interesting. People stopped me in the hallway. They asked me how I was doing. They asked me if I needed anything. The staff brought me extra desserts at dinner. The other residents invited me to sit with them at their tables. I had been here for 6 years, and suddenly, I was the one everyone wanted to talk to. But the attention didn't feel quite right. It was like wearing a coat that didn't fit. I had spent so long being invisible that being seen felt strange, almost uncomfortable. Pastor Heinrich noticed. He found me in the day room one afternoon, sitting by myself near the window. He lowered himself into the chair beside me and read out at the parking lot, the same one where Jenny had fallen 2 weeks. He relied. "Lot of people wanting to shake your hand." He said. "Too many," I said. He nodded. "It'll settle down. Give it another week. They'll find something else to talk about. Someone else's drama to chew on." I nodded. I hoped he was right that he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, with a return address I didn't recognize. He handed it to me. What's this? Your lawyer sent it to the chapel. He said you didn't answer your phone, so he sent it to me for delivery. Said it was important. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from my attorney, a man named Robert Finch who had handled my affairs for the better part of 40 years. He was old, older than me, with shaky handwriting and a voice that sounded like gravel being stirred. But he was good at his job. He had always been good at his job. The letter was short. It listed the assets that had been transferred to my name after the will was validated. The house my son had built, the insurance policy, a trust fund my wife had set up before she died, one I had forgotten about entirely. There was also a bank account I didn't recognize, opened in my name years ago with a balance that made me read the number twice. That I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Good news, Heinrich asked. Good news, I said. He didn't push for details. That was one of the things I liked about him. He knew when to ask questions and when to just sit in the quiet. That evening, I had dinner in the dining room with a few of the other residents. Emma had saved me a seat in the windows, where the evening light made the tablecloth look golden. The meal was meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the same thing they served every Wednesday, but tonight it tasted better than usual. After dinner, I went back to my room. I sat in my room chair and looked out at the oak tree. The leaves were rooting to turn, the edges going gold and red. Autumn was coming. I had always liked autumn. It was a season of endings, but also of preparation, a time when the world got ready to rest. My phone buzzed. I flipped it open. Harry, got a minute? He asked. Always, I said. Good. Because I've got something you need to hear. I've been digging into the forger, Thomas Ray, the one who made the fake will. He's in county lockup, waiting for his trial. But he's been talking. A lot. I waited. He says Ginny wasn't the only one who came to him with a job. He says there were others. People who wanted to change documents. People who wanted to make things disappear. He's been running this operation for years. And he kept records. Photographs, copies, notes. He kept everything. You're saying he's turning on his clients. I'm saying he's singing like a bird, Harry said. He knows he's going down. He's looking for a deal. So he's handing over names. And one of those names is connected to something I think you're going to want to know about. I felt my fingers tighten on the phone. Go on. Remember the house your son built, the one Ginny sold to the developer? Yes. Ray has documentation showing that the sale was facilitated by a third party. Someone who worked with the developer to push the sale through faster than usual. Someone who made sure Ginny got a lower price than she should have, in exchange for a kickback on the side. I closed my eyes. Who? His name is Carl Severson. He's a real estate broker with offices downtown. He's been doing this for years, buying up properties from vulnerable sellers and flipping them for triple the price. He worked with Ray on other deals too. Stolen identities, falsified titles, the whole package. Ginny didn't know about this. Ginny didn't know anything, Harry said. She thought she was getting fair market value. The developer offered her a price, and Severson told her it was the best she was going to get. But Ray has copies of the real appraisal. The house was worth almost twice what she sold it for. The extra money went into Severson's pocket and the developer's pocket, and Ginny never saw a dime. I sat there for a long moment. I thought about Ginny, sitting on the edge of my bed in the observation wing, telling me she had nothing left. I thought about her saying she was 42 years old with no job and no savings and no family to fall back on. She had been telling the truth about that party, at least. The man who bought her house had cheated her. The broker had cheated her. And she had been so desperate, so focused on the forged will, that she hadn't even realized she had been robbed of what was already hers. Harry, I said. Do you have proof of all this? I have copies of everything, he said. Ray's records, meticulous. He kept a separate file for every client, and he kept receipts for every transaction. I've got the paperwork on Severson going back at least 5 years. Send it to me, I said. Send it all. Already on its way. And Edwin, what? Severson is a big fish. He's been doing this to people like you for a long time. If you want to make this stick, you're going to need more than Ray's word. You're going to need a witness. Someone who can testify about how Severson operates. I know a guy, I said. Who? Let me make a call, I said. I'll get back to you. I hung up. I sat there for a long time. STA ring at the oak tree in the twilight. The leaves were dark now, almost black against the purple sky. The blue jay was gone, but I knew it would be back in the morning. It always came back that I thought about Jenny. She was sitting in a county jail cell right now, waiting for her trial. She had tried to steal from me. She had tried to destroy my life. But she had been cheated too, by people who saw her desperation and used it for their own gain. That didn't excuse what she had done, but it explained some of it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in years. A man named Sam Connolly. He had been a client of mine, back in the days before my legs gave out. He was a decent man, honest to a fault, and he owed me a favor. He picked up on the third ring. Edwin, is that you? It's me, Sam. I need your help with something. Name it. I need you to talk to the county prosecutor about a real estate broker named Carl Severson. You've got experience with him, don't you? Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Severson. That son of a bitch. He cost me my retirement savings. Bought a piece of property from me for pennies on the dollar, said it was worthless land, turned around, and sold it 6 months later for 100,000 more. I've been trying to get him for years. You've got documentation, I've got everything. Emails, appraisals, the works. I've been sitting on it because I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight him. But if you're telling me the prosecutor is interested, I'll hand it all over tomorrow. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Edwin. If this gets Severson, I'll owe you more than I already do. I hung up. The room was dark now except for the light from the hallway seeping under the door. I sat in my room chair and listened to the quiet hum of the nursing home at night. The distant sound of a television in someone's room. The soft footsteps of a night nurse doing her rounds. The wind rustling through the oak tree outside. I thought about what Jenny had said. He loved you more than he loved me. Maybe that was true. Maybe my son had kept secrets from her. Maybe he had been too protective of me, too focused on making sure I was taken care of, and in the process, he had left her feeling abandoned and alone. But that didn't give her the right to do what she did. And it didn't excuse the people who had taken advantage of her grief and confusion. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my son's note. I couldn't read it in the dark, but I didn't need to. I knew the words by heart. I folded it up and put it away. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was just coming up, painting the oak tree in shades of pink and gold. I got dressed by myself, which took longer than it used to, but I was getting better at it. My legs were still weak, but they were stronger than they had been. I had been doing the exercises the physical therapist gave me, and slowly, they were working. I rolled myself down to breakfast. The dining room was already full. Without brought me a plate of eggs and toast, and a cup of coffee that was actually YRM. I sat at my usual table by the window. Pastor Heinrich sat down across from me. He had a newspaper in his hands, open to the local section. You see this? He asked, sliding the paper across the table. I looked. There was a headline, Real Estate Broker Charged with Fraud After New Evidence Emerges. The article was small, but it was there. Carl Severson had been arrested the previous evening, charged with multiple counts of fraud and forgery. The article mentioned Thomas Ray's operation. It mentioned the testimonies of several victims, including a man named Sam Connolly. I smiled. I folded the paper and handed it back to Heinrich. Good news, I said. Good news indeed. He said that we ate breakfast in comfortable silence. The sun climbed higher, streaming through the windows, and remained the room. The other residents chattered around us, talking about their grandkids and their doctors, and the weather. I was part of that chatter now. Part of the community. Part of the life of this place. But I knew, sitting there with my coffee and my eggs and my view of the oak tree, that I was not going to stay here much longer. I had made a decision in the quiet of the night before. I had money now. I had options. And I had the memory of my son's voice, telling me to take care of what was mine. It was time to start living. The morning after the article app read, I made my first phone call as a free man. Not to a lawyer. Not to a banker. I called a real estate agent, a woman named Grace Ellison who had sold my wife and me our first house 42 years ago. She was retired now, living in a condo by the lake. But she still kept her license active because she said it kept her mind sharp. I told her what I was looking for. A small house. Something with a road, something with a porch where I could sit and watch the birds. Something within driving distance of the nursing home, because I still had friends here, and I wasn't ready to leave them behind completely. She laughed when I told her the budget. "Edwin, you could buy half the county with that kind of money." "I don't want half the county," I said. "I want a place to call home." She found one within the week. A little bungalow on a quiet street, 3 blocks from the lake. It had a front porch with a swing, a backyard with a maple tree, and a ramp that had been installed by the previous owner, who had also used a wheelchair. The ramp was worn and creaky, but Grace said she would have it replaced as part of the sale. I went to see it on a Thursday afternoon. Pastor Heinrich drove me, because I still couldn't drive myself and I didn't trust the nursing home's van. We pulled into the driveway, and I looked up at the house. It was small. It was unassuming. It was painted a soft yellow that had faded to the color of old butter. I asked Heinrich to help me out of the car. He put my walker on the ground, and I took hold of the handles. I stood up slowly, my legs wobbling beneath me. The physical therapy had been working, but I still had a long way to go. I walked up the ramp. It creaked under my weight, but it held. I unlocked the front door with the key Grace had given me, and I stepped inside. That the house was empty. No furniture. No pictures on the walls. Just clean floors and fresh paint, and sunlight pouring through the windows. I walked through the living room and into the kitchen. The counters were new. The appliances were new. The previous owner had taken good care of the place. That I walked down the hallway to the bedroom. It was small but bright, with a window that faced the backyard road. I could see the maple tree through the glass, its leaves just rooting to turn. I sat down on the floor. I didn't have a chair yet, so I just sat on the roadwood and looked out the window. I sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet. Pastor Heinrich found me there. He stood in the doorway and looked down at me. "Well," he said. I looked up at him. "It's perfect," I said. He smiled. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen on his face in a long time. "Good," he said. "Now let's get you some furniture." The move took 2 weeks. I didn't have much to bring. A few boxes of clothes. A crate of books. My room chair, the one I had sat in by the window for 6 years. The staff at the nursing home helped me pack. Emma cried when I said goodbye. She hugged me and told me to visit, to come back for Sunday dinners, to never forget the people who had taken care of me. I promised her I would. And I meant it. The first night in my new house, I sat on the front porch. I had a chair now, a comfortable one with cushions, and I had a small table beside it for my coffee cup. The sun was going down over the lake, painting the water in shades of orange and pink. I sat there and watched the colors change until the sky went to RK and the stars came out. I thought about my son. I thought about the house he had built, the one Jenny had sold, the one I would never see again. That house was gone now, replaced by condos and parking lots. But this house was new. This house was mine. I thought about Jenny, sitting in her cell, waiting for her trial. I didn't know what would happen to her. I didn't know if she would go to prison or get probation or somehow find a way to rebuild her life. But I knew that I had stopped thinking about her with anger. What I felt now was something closer to sadness. She had been a good person once. She had baked pies and remembered my eye drops and made my son happy. Somewhere along the way, she had lost herself. Grief and fear and desperation had turned her into someone she didn't recognize. I didn't know if she could find her way back, but I hoped she could, for my son's sake. If nothing else, the next morning, I called Harry. "I need a favor," I said. "Name it," he said. "I need you to find out if Jenny has a lawyer. If she doesn't, I want to pay for one. Not the best one money can buy, just someone competent, someone who can make sure she gets a fair trial." Harry was quiet for a moment. "You want to pay for her defense after everything she did? She was cheated too," I said. "By Severson, by the developer, by the circumstances of her life. That doesn't excuse what she did to me, but it explains some of it. And my son loved her. I have to remember that." Harry sighed. "You're a better man than I am, Edwin. I'll make the call." I hung up. I sat on my porch and drank my coffee and watched the birds in the maple tree. A blue jay landed on a branch and tilted its head at me. I smiled at it. "Good morning," I said. It chirped back, then flew away. That afternoon, I drove to the nursing home. I was driving now, a used sedan I had bought from a dealership 2 towns over. It was an old car with worn seats and a radio that only picked up 2 stations. But it ran, and it had air conditioning, and it was mine. I parked in the lot, the same lot where Jenny had fallen. I looked at the spot on the pavement, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet acceptance that it had happened, and now it was over. I walked inside. Emeritha saw me coming, and she ran around the nurse's station to give me a hug. Edwin, you look wonderful. I feel wonderful, I said. I went to the day room. Pastor Heinrich was there, playing chess with Frank, the man with Alzheimer's who used to cry about his lost dog. Frank was winning, which meant nothing. He always won, and he always forgot he had won 5 minutes later. Heinrich looked up at me. You came back. I said I would. I said that sit down. Play the winner. Frank wandered away to look at the television, so I sat down across from Heinrich and set up the pieces. We played for an hour, maybe 2. He won the first game. I won the second. We split the third. Your game is getting better, he said. Yours is getting worse, I said. He laughed. It was a good sound. Dinner time came. I stayed. Emeritha brought me a tray with meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the same meal they served every Wednesday. I ate it at the table by the window, looking out at the oak tree. The leaves were turning fast now, bright red and gold, and I watched them fall one by one in the evening breeze. After dinner, I walked down the hall to the observation wing. I stopped at the heavy metal door with the small SQA window. I looked through it at the room where I had spent one long morning. The chair was still bolted to the floor. The bed was still made with its crisp white sheets. I turned away and walked back to the main hallway. I said goodbye to Emeritha. I said goodbye to Heinrich. I walked out to my car and drove home. The next week, I got a letter. It was from Jenny. It was written on plain paper with a pencil, and the handwriting was shaky and uneven. She was in county jail, awaiting trial. Her court-appointed lawyer had been replaced by a private attorney, paid for by an anonymous donor. I smiled when I read that the letter said, Edwin, I don't know why you did it. I don't know why you would help me after what I tried to do. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for the will and the transfer and everything else. I'm sorry for the way I treated you after my husband died. I was so angry and so red that I couldn't see you as a person anymore. I just saw you as the obstacle. The thing standing between me and the life I thought I deserved. I was wrong. You were never the obstacle. I was the obstacle. I was the one who made all the wrong choices. I was the one who let the grief turn me into someone I didn't recognize. If I ever get out of here, I don't know what I'll do. But I know I won't try to hurt you again. I can't promise that I'll be good, because I don't know if I remember how. But I can promise that I'll try. Thank you for the lawyer. You didn't have to do that. You had every reason not to. But you did it anyway, and I don't understand why. Maybe someday I will. Jenny. I folded the letter and put it in my jacket pocket, next to my son's note. I sat on my porch and watched the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and gold. The blue jay was back, perched on the maple tree, watching me with its head tilted. I thought about forgiveness. I didn't know if that was what I felt. It was too soon, maybe too close to the wound. But I knew I didn't want to see the anger around with me forever. That was what Jenny had done. Ride her anger until it consumed her. I didn't want that to happen to me. I wanted to move 4-way road. I wanted to live. I wanted to sit on my porch and watch the leaves turn and the seasons change and the years pass. I wanted to remember my son the way he was, not the way he died. I wanted to remember the good days, the Sunday afternoons, and the apple pies and the sound of his laugh. I had been given a second chance. I wasn't going to waste it. Autumn came in full force. The leaves fell, and I raked them into piles and left them for the wind to scatter. I drove to the grocery store and bought food for myself and the neighbor's cat, which had taken to visiting my porch every afternoon. I went to the nursing home for Sunday dinners and watched Emeritha's face light up when I walked through the door. I stayed root playing chess again. Not just with Heinrich, but with a club that met at the library twice a month. I wasn't the best player in the room, but I was good enough to hold my own, and the company was pleasant. I thought about getting a dog. The neighbor's cat was nice, but I missed having a real companion, something that would greet me at the door and follow me from room to room. I looked at the local shelter's website and found a golden retriever named Gus who was 9 years old and needed a quiet home. I drove out to the shelter the next day. Gus was a big lump of a dog with floppy ears and sad eyes. He laid his head on my lap when I sat down on the bench in the visiting road. I petted him for a while, and he sighed, a long and happy sound. I adopted him that afternoon. He came home with me and sniffed every corner of the house. He found the spot on the porch where the sun landed in the afternoon and made himself at home. I bought him a bed and a food bowl and a bag of kibble that cost more than my own groceries that night. I sat on the porch with Gus curled up at my feet. The sky was clear and the stars were out. I could see the lake in the distance, dark and still, reflecting the moonlight. That I reached into my jacket and pulled out my son's note. I read it one more time. Take a re of what's yours. I folded it and put it back in my pocket. I leaned down and scratched Gus behind the ears. I'm working on it, I said as he wagged his tail.